off, I want to thank everybody for coming and welcome you guys. My name is Shelly Emery. I'm the current president for the Junior Women's Club of Ramsey. And on behalf of the entire planning team, which involves the juniors, the police department, the Ramsey High School and Don Bosco SACs, which are the student assistant coordinators, as well as the SAD clubs and all the educators that helped us, we want to thank you for coming. As a planning team, as we planned this event, it was really important to us that when you guys walk away, you're walking away with actionable information. Not just another speech about drugs or alcohol, but something you could actually take action on. We wanted you to be able to either start the conversation within your families or continue the conversation. In my professional life, I specialize in user adoption. And what that means is I help clients to maximize on their return on investment for their software purchases. And I'm pretty decent at it. And what I always tell them is that learning is not a one-time event. It's a continuous event, and it has to go on and on and on in different formats, in different mediums, and it has to be a continual process. This is no different. This is something that, whether this is your first step here or this is a continuation in the conversation within your families, it's the same thing. Continuing to have the conversation in different ways, in different formats, is what's going to make it a successful combination. So those, in the clients, those that adopt that and believe in that philosophy, they see the success. And from everything that I've learned through planning this and everything I've learned from Sean and his team and from Jenica and Sunny, is that it's the same. Having that continued conversation with your families and your kids, and kids talking to your parents, that's what's going to make it successful and help you avoid the negative road that could be ahead. Substance abuse, drugs, alcohol, and mental health conversations should not be a one-time event. They should continue to be a continuous event. There's two sets of speakers that you're going to hear from today. One of them is going to provide you meaningful and factual information, and the other set is going to provide you with personal stories. As you listen to those personal stories, you may think to yourself, this couldn't happen to me. I will never be on that stage. I would never be in that situation. Guess what? I'll bet you they thought the same thing. And now looking back, they say, if only I had known. Next, we're going to see a short video, followed by our first speaker. Our first speaker is Mark Tomat. He's a 29-year-old recovering heroin addict. He's been sober for 3 years and continues to share his story to help others so that they don't end up where he was at one time in his life. Finally, just a little housekeeping. Everybody should have received some of these colorful cards. We have students that are going to help us collect the cards throughout the presentations. The goal is for you to write the questions on the card. If you are done with it, just kind of casually hold it up in between speakers and we'll collect them. If you need a second one, just hold up your hand and we'll bring some other cards around. At the end of the presentations, we will collect the cards, take a step back. We'll collect the cards before our last speaker to give the panel some time to look at the questions, but then we'll go into a Q&A session. So again, if you have questions, if you can write them on the cards, that would be wonderful. And Gabby, if we can start the video.
If I had only known that, I would have started doing heroin when I was 17. I would have got myself out of the basement, when I was 13. I would have put myself in different situations.
If I'd only known what I know now about heroin, it would not even be an option in my head to even start using. How quickly life spun out of control and how quickly everything fell apart just from the one time hanging out with friends that I thought, oh, this can't be that bad. It looks like a good time. It's amazing to me to think back to how quickly that road led me down to just being homeless, in jail, and having nothing left to my name, all because I wanted to hang out with people that were using drugs.
If I'd only known where this was going to lead me, maybe I would have changed my focus on what I was looking at.
It started in the basement, smoking and drinking, and when I was younger, and before you know it, it was pretty quickly, it had gotten pretty serious. I got into some hard stuff, and I was probably for about a couple years.
The average day for me when addicted to heroin was wake up sick in the morning, terribly sick. It's almost impossible to describe withdrawal to somebody that's never experienced it. It's to the point where you want to kill yourself, but you don't want to kill yourself because you know if you can just get the heroin that it'll get better.
Well, the previous day ends, you swear you're going to stop. You swear this is the last time. You even, I even would throw away, utensils or anything, or throw drugs away. And then the next morning you wake up and it's like that never happened. You don't even remember that. It's off to the races. It's like almost instantly.
But I was one of those people that was able to maintain a job only because I needed to make the money in order to support my habit. But I mean, I was like the worst employee you could ever imagine. My bosses hated me. And, I would do the bare minimum. I'd get through the day. And then immediately once I would leave, it was from that point to the next day was constantly, getting high.
Addiction's a job. You're loyal to it more than to anything else. You'll steal. You'll do whatever you have to do. And if you're sick, you're definitely going to do whatever you have to do. So it's constant energy. You're always looking. You're always trying to score. You're always trying to get money. You're always trying to get cop. You're always trying to get high. It's a constant cycle, and it doesn't end.
No one thinks that they're going to wind up at the Bergen County Jail. They never imagine it. What starts out as some recreational use of drugs, there's never in a million years would they imagine they would be wearing an orange jumpsuit and be handcuffed and be incarcerated in the jail. No one really believes that that's where they're going to wind up. That's not their intention. But when drugs pull you into that, you start to make choices and decisions that you never dreamed you would make.
I wish I knew how it would just devastate his life and our life, and how nothing would ever be the same again.
If every user had only known that recreational use isn't an option for most of these drugs.
I would say probably once a week I encounter a patient myself in the emergency department who's overdosed, and probably we're seeing somebody several times a week or perhaps on a daily basis who's overdosed.
What I would say is that the drugs that we're talking about today are so highly addictive, it's a game changer. That when you are taking something like OxyContin, on any type of regular basis, you will become addicted to it and you will have a withdrawal from it.
I see people that are going out on a daily basis, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, going to our neighboring source city, which is Paterson, New Jersey, and purchasing heroin in bundles and bricks and just trying to satisfy that sick feeling so they could stop being sick.
The best description that I ever heard was from a young man who had been addicted and was in recovery, and he described the addiction as, he said to me, "I'd like you to hold your breath and keep holding your breath and consider that the air that you're breathing is like the heroin that I use." And he said that's how strong the urge is to go back and use heroin.
If I had only known that those long-acting synthetic opiates were in fact as addictive and as terrible as they are, I certainly would have not prescribed as many.
When I was 14, 15 years old, if you would have told me, 10 years later, I would have been homeless with a family who didn't speak to me and locked up eventually in the New Jersey jail system, I would have told you were crazy. But looking back at it, every single person that I've started doing these drugs with is either in the New Jersey jail system or has passed away.
Over time, you will absolutely violate all of the things that you promised, whether you were aware of it or not, that you would ever do in your life. And we see it every day.
In some situations, we've also seen young girls and young men at that as well that have become prostitutes, selling their body in order to gain money to fix their addiction.
In 2016, hardly a day went by in Bergen County without a heroin or opioid-related arrest, overdose, fatality, or Narcan save.
And what we're doing is we're trying to help as opposed to arrest ourselves out of the problem. we will not arrest ourselves out of the problem when it comes to heroin addiction.
Drug addiction doesn't care how much money you have, doesn't care what color skin you have. It's not a white problem, black problem, Spanish problem. It's not an economical problem. There is no, put simply, there is no common face when it comes to drug addiction.
It's not a personality flaw. It's not pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's a disease. And you have to understand it's a disease if you're ever going to get anyone else who's using better.
If I'd only known I was worth more, I would have never treated myself the way I did.
You may think it's just drinking and it's just smoking, but most of the times it's not just that. And if it is that just for now, then it's gonna most likely lead to something more.
The primary path that we're seeing to addiction to heroin and opioid abuse is through prescription painkillers. So my advice to parents and to patients, to young patients in particular, is to have a conversation with their doctor about less powerful painkillers, alternatives to opioids.
I didn't know really what addiction was. I mean, I kind of knew. I just didn't think it was me. I didn't think it was going to happen to me.
I didn't think it could happen to me.
It ain't gonna happen to me. I was wrong.
No one thinks this will happen to them.
We didn't think this could happen to us.
No one thinks it's going to happen to them or to their family or to their loved one, but unfortunately, it does.
What I would tell somebody young is that it can happen to them. It can happen to anybody. I've seen people never touch a drug in their life, go off to college on a scholarship for sports and get injured, and the next thing you know, they're in rehab. It happens real quick. It can happen to anybody.
I know that across the country, we're seeing marijuana and some other drugs being legalized or decriminalized, and I know that sends a mixed message to young people that if these drugs are okay, why are these drugs bad? But my advice is that this epidemic is far too dangerous to treat casually, and I would just say, now you know, walk away from any drugs that are before you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Tomat, and I'm a recovering heroin addict. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody for being here on your Sunday afternoon. This is probably one of the most pressing issues in every single community in Bergen County. This auditorium should be filled with how pressing this issue is. And I want to thank everybody who put this together for us. Before I get into my story, it's pretty safe for me to assume that some of you know the deepest, darkest part of my story. My job is to tell you what led up to that point and how I'm doing after. I'll paint the picture for you. A loving Bergen County family, raises a nice family in a loving house. Their son, as a child, has straight A's, ends up going to Don Bosco Prep, becomes the captain of the basketball team, part of the Ambassadors Club, a polite young man who, at the age of 16, nobody would ever have thought what had happened to me was going to happen. Up until that point, I didn't touch a drink or a drug in my life. A month shy of my 17th birthday, I was at a party. I decided to take a drink. I got drunk. A joint was put in my face. I took a hit. Looking back on it now, I can clearly tell you that something changed in me at that moment. Getting straight A's, pleasing my parents, succeeding in life took a back seat. It was all about the next party. Started off on the weekends, then I was doing it every day. I went to school in Florida, and I was introduced to OxyContin, and it completely changed my life. I started selling drugs and dropped out of school, slowly became my best customer with a 30 pill a day opiate habit. I moved back up here when things got tough, and I was just gonna change the scenery. I didn't want to change anything I was doing. I had a prescription from a doctor that said I could have these pills. I was taking way too many of them. My intake was entirely too high, and stopping wasn't an option. I didn't see a way to stop and live my life. So I continue doing what I'm doing. I'm selling drugs, and the police kicked in my door. My brother was selling drugs with me. He's younger than me, and he got arrested along with me. And my brother at that moment decided to change his life and get sober, which is the main reason why I'm standing at this podium and can tell you that I'm sober today. I continued doing what I was doing, met a girl, she had a kid, he was a month and a half old. I fell in love with her, fell in love with their kid, started raising him like he was my own, supporting everything that goes into supporting a child by selling drugs. Every day putting his life in jeopardy. And eventually on Valentine's Day of 2014, that all caught up to me. I went to her house, I dropped her off a few bags of heroin, and I left. She called me crying frantically that her son was unconscious and unresponsive, and that she think he got one of the bags of heroin that I had left her. Bag got dropped on the ground, and this 9-month-old little boy picked it up, put it in his mouth, and he overdosed. His heart stopped 3 times, and by the EMS services and the grace of God, he's still with us today, and I'm standing at this podium. I was arrested, held on $300,000 bail, my face plastered on every news channel, every newspaper. Dr. Drew and Nancy Grace are having segments on their nationally televised shows talking about me. I didn't see any way out of this. When I was arrested, I was 109 pounds. I had a 60 bag of heroin a day habit. At one point, the only way I saw out was to end my life. You know, I took my sheet that they give you issued from the jail, put it around my neck, and I was going to end it. That's what drug addiction does to you. It doesn't allow you to see a way out. Now keep in mind the story, the picture that I painted of the young, successful, growing teenager that, 5 years prior, you would have never thought this would have happened. So I get out of jail, and it's pretty simple that I have a problem. I have a heroin problem. That little boy got out of the hospital. He was going to be fine, and it was pretty simple to everybody in this room not to pick up heroin ever again, right? It wasn't the case for me. All the guilt, all the shame, I didn't deal with it. I picked up again, and I overdosed. Woke up to my father and my brother at my bedside in the hospital. This thing doesn't care who you are or what you've been through. It wants you dead any way that it possibly can. In the interim of me getting out of jail and my overdose, the girl who I've just been in every news outlet with is now pregnant with my son, my first son. He was born February 28th of 2015. He's 3 years old. And when he was born, I was a homeless junkie running around the streets of Patterson, living in abandoned buildings, wasn't talking to my family, wasn't showering, not eating, not shaving. I was a lost cause. When my son was born, I wish I could tell you that at that moment I changed, something changed in me that was like, I want to get sober, but it didn't. I was so far in the grips of addiction that it didn't really change me, it didn't faze me. And it wasn't until April 19th of 2015 that I had this aha moment where I was just like, what am I doing? Like, is this what I want for my life? I checked into rehab. My sober date is April 20th, 2015. When I got out of rehab, I had nowhere to go. I was homeless. And I went to a 12-step anonymous fellowship meeting and raised my hand, told everybody what was going on with me, and I was offered an opportunity to live in this church and sleep on a pew. I had 3 requirements. I had to talk to the reverend at the church once a week. I had to get a job and attend meetings on a daily basis. I stayed in that church for 14 months, the first 14 months of my sobriety, and slept on a wooden pew. I did everything the state of New Jersey had asked of me to get my son back. And at this point, I'm a 2-time convicted felon. I have a distribution felony and a child endangerment felony. On paper, I shouldn't be allowed near an elementary school. And after my first 14 months, I moved out of the church, and the state of New Jersey granted me full custody of my now 16-month-old son. 16 months prior, I'm a homeless junkie living in an abandoned building. This disease does not care who you are, or what you aspire to be. At 16 years old, anybody who knew me would have never guessed that I'd be homeless at 26 years old, a complete drug addict with nothing. But that's what happened to me. And what it boils down to is, if there was an assembly like this, my family wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. We had drug speakers come in and talk to us. I didn't pay attention. I was the guy sleeping in the back of class because it couldn't happen to me. We all live in a good neighborhood. We all work hard to give our kids the best. And to be honest with you, it's worse in the suburbs than it is in the inner cities. So to think that this thing can't walk through your front doors, you're sorely mistaken. And you're taking the right step by being here and becoming aware. I have friends that saw the flyers for this thing, right? And they took a picture and sent it to me, and they were like, you got your name up there, posted all over Ramsey, New Jersey, that you're a recovering heroin addict. Like, why would you do that? And I thought about it, and the worst part of this whole thing is the stigma that comes with being a drug addict. When I grew up, I thought the homeless guy on the corner with a brown paper bag and sleeping with a shopping cart, that's a drug addict. Now, that's just the second to last stop on the train. Because you're looking at a drug addict right here in the suit. So the biggest thing that I think of is that this stigma needs to go away, because we're not bad people trying to get good. We're sick people trying to get well. And I believe I was born a drug addict, that the second I put it in my body, I have a chemical makeup in my brain that changes. And you don't know who it's going to affect. Like I said, this thing could walk right through your doors, and you wouldn't even know. This is an awareness thing. As far as prevention goes, be involved in your kids' lives. Make sure you know what they're doing, who they're doing it with. And it's very hard to draw a line between friend and discipliner, but it's very important that if your kid is experiencing a problem, that they feel comfortable enough to come tell you. And for the parents, that's my advice. Take preventative measures, have a good relationship with your kids, that they know if they get in trouble, they can trust you. Because I had the same opportunity, but at 17 years old, I got behind the wheel of a car and got a DWI. Because I'd rather take my chances with these guys than to take my chances with my dad. So, if you take anything from this, please, just keep an open mind that this could happen to anybody. I agree with everything they just said on that video. And I'm happy I was asked to be here. I'm happy you're all here. And just please keep an open mind, because, like I said, we're not bad people trying to get good. We're sick people trying to get well. And for me to have my name plastered all over this town as a recovering heroin addict, this is who I am. And I'll wear it with pride, because too many kids are dying. And it's got to stop. So thanks for having me, and we'll bring up our next speaker.
Thank you, Mark. That was pretty compelling. Unfortunately, it is a story we hear a lot, and doesn't normally end up the way it did for you. Although the details were a little bit more extreme, it's really a story that we've heard many, many times, and I want to thank you for sharing that with us. I am Brian Gurney. I'm the Chief of Police of the Ramsey Police Department, and I was asked to speak real quick. First of all, just a couple accolades. I want to thank the Junior Women's Club for putting this together. You guys are great. Thank you so much. It's such an important topic, and it's really important to get the message out. And again, I want to thank you. I want to thank Dr. Murphy for his hospitality here and his staff. You always do a good job. Dr. Murphy and I are in constant communication on every issue that deals with Ramsey, public safety, whether it be drug abuse, school violence. So we have a very strong conduit within the police department and the Board of Education. Just a little bit about me real quick. As I said before, I'm the chief of police, but before I was chief, I was one of the first drug recognition officers in the state of New Jersey, which means that I can tell the type of symptoms of a person who's under the influence of 7 different categories of drugs. Today we're going to be talking a lot about narcotic analgesics, that's what we call them, but everybody knows them as opiates. It's really it's all-encompassing word. There's natural derivatives like heroin. Heroin was processed through opium that was actually used as a cough suppressant in the early 1900s. Methadone, that was used as like a maintenance program for people that were under the influence of heroin and trying to wean off. That was used, and that was developed by Germany during World War I and World War II, because so many of their soldiers would get addicted to the morphine that was being as a painkiller. And then you could see there was OxyContin, which is one of the I guess that really got the national recognition with the opiate problems. And now you're hearing out fentanyl. Fentanyl is a synthetic opiate, so it's made chemically. So it has many, many different chemical cousins. So there's many different types, and it's normally used for people that have severe pain, cancer patients, and it's very, very powerful. It's more powerful than heroin, and again, and that's why you're seeing a lot of these overdose deaths are directly related to fentanyl, and it's just a very cheaper way to sell the drug, and it's easier to get. It's being shipped like from different countries across the world, and it comes here and is sold as heroin. Which, when I first started talking about the opiates, I didn't realize that 50% of kids that get addicted to opiates, they start right in their own parents' medicine cabinet. And 50%, so I thought I was so smart and I thought I knew so much, and I had no idea that that was happening. And, you can like drop it off at headquarters if if you do end up getting prescribed some pain medications, we do that. But that's, it's just that happens. And the thing that with opiates that you have to remember, it gets prescribed, maybe you have a procedure, maybe you have a knee operation or something. It doesn't kill the pain at the knee. It kills the pain in your brain. It creates a chemical between the synapse gaps. It causes an extreme addiction processing. It's a little tongue-tied right now. But anyway, it happens chemically through your brain. And you're seeing it now that the addiction, as Mark had mentioned, and what was mentioned in the video, it's happening to kids in our town, and it happens to kids throughout the state, that the addiction is so much bigger than they are. It's hard enough to go through school with all the things that go on in school, but now you have an addiction like this. Both my kids went to Ramsey High School. And my kids the kids would come over, and I would always buy pizza and soda for them. They'd play video games. My son was on the football team. 4 kids that used to play at my house are dead. All from opiates. 4. So I have a little bit of I got a horse in this race too. And unfortunately, because of the job that we do, we have to go to all these overdose deaths. You don't know how many parents that I knew personally, my best friend's son, that died of an overdose. And it's really compelling to me, and it's hard to switch gears onto, are you a person that cares, or you have to be the police chief that's got to be strong and do an investigation, find out what happened. So it's very, very difficult for me, and it's difficult for the officers that I work with as well, because we're people too with feelings, and it's just really hard to see this time and time again, and the kids are getting younger and younger. The one thing I will say is law enforcement was able to identify that there's a problem. And maybe enforcement is not necessarily the way to go, and just charge people with crimes and send them to jail. So there's been a real initiative for pushing for treatment, which is great. Gabir Grewal, who was the Bergen County prosecutor, who is now the Attorney General, he was on the forefront of this. And as I just said, he went from Bergen County prosecutor to the Attorney General. And I'm like, okay, now what's going to happen? Well, let me tell you something. We have a person in Bergen County who's going to run with the ball. Dennis Calla is the acting Bergen County prosecutor. He's my friend. And I assure you that law enforcement, criminal justice, is going to really identify this and try to help people that do have addictions to get off the drugs. And I know that I'm sure the prosecutor will mention a couple things about the initiatives that they're doing in the jails. But without any further ado, I would like to, my friend, invite him up, Dennis Calla, the acting Bergen County prosecutor. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Chief, for your kind words, and thank you for inviting me here. Chief, it seems like we in law enforcement have been fighting this battle forever. This battle against drugs and trying to protect our kids and trying to protect the community. And this opioid crisis is just the latest wave that's hit us like a tsunami, just about knocking us over. It's a public health crisis. And Mark, you're putting yourself out there and telling us your story indicates the severity of the crisis, and it indicates the grab that these opiates have, not just on young people, but middle-aged people, older people such as myself, people from all walks of life. You don't have to be a homeless person. You could be a top executive, make a lot of money, and still die of an overdose. And it happens every day. You're going to hear another testimony in a little while from Gail Cole, who's going to tell you that the effect of this crisis has had on her family, it has had on her personally. She lost her son. I would ask you to listen to those testimonies and take them to heart, because I'm going to give you some statistics and some facts, but it's the personal that you really connect with. It's the testimony of somebody like Mark or somebody like Gail who tells you of the pain that they feel every day. Mark still feels pain every day. He tells you. He's a heroin addict. He feels that pull every day. It never leaves him. It's a wound. It's an open wound. That's why he says he's in recovery. He's not cured. There is no cure. Every day, he has to get well again. Right, Mark? He has to get well again. He has to wake up and he has to decide, I'm going to be well today. I'm going to try not to do it today. And day by day, and hour by hour, and minute by minute, he fights that battle. Such is the pull of that drug. Gail Cole, she's fighting it now. She's remembering now about her son. She's feeling that pain. A mother's pain that never leaves until the day that she herself passes. So listen to her story as you listen to Mark's story and make that connection. Whether you're a student who's going to have to make that decision about that temptation, whether you're a parent who has to be on constant watch with your kids to make sure that they're not falling into that black hole, or if they do make that misstep and go into that hole, that you can pull them up. Try to make them well again. This is a national problem, public health crisis. And we in law enforcement can do only so much. It's a crisis that's particularly acute in our state. 80% of the overdoses in our state are opioid related. 80%. I'd like to give you the statistics now, starting from the year 2015. In Bergen County, in the year 2015, 3 years ago, barely 3 years ago, we had 288 overdoses. We had 170 saves from Narcan deployed by law enforcement. Fatalities, 87 dead. 30% of those who overdosed. But take another look behind that statistic. Those are the numbers that we know about, right? Those are the overdoses that are reported by law enforcement. There are other overdoses that don't get reported. Let's jump to 2016. How many overdoses in Bergen County? 320, an 11% increase of the previous year. How many Narcan saves? 180. How many fatalities? Dead people? 98. We saved only 30%. Only 30% of the overdoses that were responded to were saved. Let's talk about 2017. And these numbers are just tentative. How many overdoses? 507. That's a 58% increase from 2016, 58%. We're losing the battle. How many Narcan saves? 180. How many fatalities? Dead people? 131. A 33% increase over the previous year. And then again, I ask you to look behind those numbers, look behind those statistics, because these are the ones that we know about. And I ask you to look behind all of the statistics that I've mentioned to you a second time. These are the starkest statistics that we know about. The reported overdoses, the Narcan saves, the deaths. How about the hundreds and thousands of people in Bergen County that are using opioids every day and don't overdose, but are on the path either to death, to ruin lives, to ruin families. Think about those statistics. So the problem is growing. So obviously there's an increased use of opioids, and particularly heroin. But the deaths and the overdoses, 58% increase in 2017, are really fueled not just by heroin, but as the chief said, by fentanyl. Fentanyl is 50% more powerful, up to 50% more powerful than heroin. It's a killer. A few grains of heroin will kill you. Law enforcement has to wear masks, has to wear rubber gloves when they make a heroin bust in very many cases, because the heroin is cut with fentanyl, which is a killer. And it's cheap. You buy it over the dark web. It comes from China, sometimes through Canada, and it's used to cut the heroin to make it more powerful. Sometimes it's used by pushers in the heroin to kill, so that the buyers will know this is the good stuff. This is the stuff that will really make you high. As I say, you can buy it over the dark web and you can have it delivered to your house. That's what we've come to in this epidemic. Well, what are we doing about it? As I said, we're law enforcement. There's only so much that we can do. This is not really our area. Right, Chief? We come from a generation, I guess, that was used to enforcement. Let's make the arrest. Let's lock them up. If you're on the prosecution side, as I've been, let's prosecute them. And if they deserve it, let's put them in jail. And even as long ago as, I guess, 30 years ago, we realized that's really not the way to treat this problem. And there has been an increasing emphasis on prevention and education. And I think education is most important. What do we do in the way of education? Well, from the prosecutor's office, what we do is we have a task force of people from our office. We go into every high school in Bergen County. Every Friday, we have a morning session and we have an afternoon session. And we present a video called Pathway to Addiction. It's presented usually by two people from our narcotics task force. We feel that it helps to have people like Gail Cole there, and she gives up a lot of her Fridays, just as she's giving up her Sunday, because she puts herself out there in memory of her son. And she speaks to the students. And sometimes we have somebody who's in recovery like Mark, and he speaks to the students to try to make that personal connection. So we do it in every high school. And we also feel that it's necessary to get the kids when they're younger. So this year, we're testing our presentation out for the 7th graders. And we hope to roll it out to whoever will listen to us, whoever invites us for their 7th grade students next year, we're there. We're on the battlefield. I really feel, though, that this is very limited when you think about it. Because we live in a drug-soaked culture. And I feel that this has to be part of the curriculum in the grade schools. It's got to be part of the health instruction. Just like we tell kids about tobacco and smoking, we have to tell them about alcohol and drugs from a young age. It has to become part of them. Because, you know, when they get to be teenagers, when they're in high school and they're feeling that peer pressure, I feel like it's almost too late. And we're ill-suited to do it. Law enforcement is really ill-suited to do it. But we're doing it because in a lot of cases, no one else is doing it. And it has to be done. We have to try to save lives. So we have education. Also, what we're doing is the HEART program, Heroin Addiction Recovery Team. At 3 of our police departments in the county, Mahwah, Paramus, and Lyndhurst, one from Upper County, Middle County, Lower County. People who possess drugs, have a drug problem, can walk in at specified hours, turn in their drugs, not be prosecuted, and ask for help. And a recovery specialist will respond and will offer them help. We'll try to get them the help, whether it's detox or inpatient treatment. We'll try to get them the help that they need. We're not doing it alone. We have partners from the community who help us in this endeavor. There's also the Opioid Overdose Recovery Program. When there's a report of an overdose and law enforcement responds and deploys Narcan, naloxone, to save a life, there's an immediate notification. That person is taken to the hospital because Narcan will save his life for a time. A recovery specialist will respond to the hospital and will offer help, whatever help that person needs. We also have a program called Operation Helping Hand. And we're going to be doing it this spring, very soon, where we have a team of local and prosecutor's office detectives and our partners in the community. Prosecutors, detectives will have surveillances in Patterson, the drug market, local drug market, and the people who are coming back, mostly young people, who have just copped, will be stopped. If there's probable cause, there'll be a search. If drugs are found, they'll be arrested. They'll be brought back for processing. And there'll be a recovery specialist and a clinician there to help them, to offer them help if they want it. Sometimes they take it, sometimes they don't. If they don't right away, the recovery specialists will follow them. They'll call them once a week, sometimes twice a week, find out how they are, to try to coax them into recovery. Excuse me. Whoa. It's upstaging me. I think I am. There's been some success with that. Some people have gone into recovery. Some people have stayed in recovery. How long they'll stay into recovery, we don't know. Only time will tell. It's hard, as Mark told you. It's hard. We have prescription medicine drop boxes across the county in 44 police departments and at 3 Walgreens locations where people can deposit their drugs, legal and illegal, mostly legal, which they want to get rid of. Is it enough? No, it's not enough. It's not enough. But up to now, it's what we can do. And we're always looking for new ideas. But there is a lack of new ideas. A couple of months ago, I went to a seminar given by a state's attorney on what this state's attorney was doing in the state of New York. And it turned out that we were doing everything that he suggested that we should do. Is it everything? Probably not. But there are really a dearth of ideas in this area. I'd like to touch, in closing, upon the Overdose Prevention Act, which most of you should be familiar with. And this is an act which is to encourage people to seek help and to seek help for their friends. If a person has overdosed, that person can call 911 and can ask for help with the assurance that he or she will not be arrested, nor charged, nor prosecuted. It's a helping hand. If a person is with a person who has overdosed, that person can call 911, can call the police, and can rest assured that neither the caller nor the person who is overdosed will be prosecuted, will be arrested. So I encourage you all to spread that message. Keep it in your heads. Tell your kids. This is an epidemic. If you don't know it, each one of you somehow is touched by this epidemic. You may not know it. It may be a sibling that's addicted or is on the path to addiction. You just don't know it. It may be a friend, and you don't know it. It may be a friend's child, and you'll find out in 2 or 3 years when there's an overdose or when you hear that the person is in rehab. I guarantee you, each one of you is touched by this. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sergeant Tim Shoemaker. Sergeant Shoemaker came to the Ramsey Police Department in 1996. Before that, he served as a university police officer at Fairleigh-Dickinson University and earned his Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice from Caldwell University. He graduated summa cum laude and is currently studying towards his master's degree in organizational leadership. As a DARE instructor, Sergeant Shoemaker rose to extremely high honors. being designated as the Dare Instructor of the Year for New Jersey in 2009, and the National Dare Instructor of the Year for the entire country in 2011. Tim holds numerous other New Jersey legislative citations, as well as U.S. Senate citation. Tim speaks all over the country, internationally, and a wide range of topics covered from self-empowerment, leadership, drug-free choices, and the benefits of a healthy lifestyle. He's a devoted father of two and a long-term friend of Ramsey. Please welcome Sergeant Tim Shoemaker.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean. All right, brother. All right, thank you so much. I'm going to switch gears here and take you guys around the world in 30 minutes. So I'm going to ask you to put your seatbelts on. My pace is going to be a little bit accelerated compared to what's led up to this. All right, got a lot of information to cover, but it's good stuff. So hang on tight. We're going to go for a ride. Since I was about 6 years old, I've been in a very intimate relationship with substance abuse, addiction, recovery, in almost every aspect of drug abuse and addiction for a very, very long time. So to say that I have an intimate relationship with it is an understatement. I think that so much of what we talk about and so much of what oftentimes befalls this subject matter is depressing, it's scary, sometimes it's ominous. Like this statistic here, that the long-term recovery rate for addiction is less than that of most cancers. You look at something like that and it's scary. But what I want to remind all of you is that it's very inspirational as well, because preventing that from happening is a very powerful thing. It's a very inspiring thing. And as I look at the audience here, I see so many people that I've worked with in the past, from Gail to Ms. Fine in the back there, to the Junior Women's Club of Ramsey, and your predecessors. And what we've done in this community and in other places to try to prevent substance abuse addiction is pretty fun, right? And it's empowering and it's powerful. And so the route to us fixing this is not doom and gloom. It's actually a pretty fun way. Drug abuse is 100% preventable. That's inspiring if you think about it, because they say that the chains of addiction are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be thrown off. Well, if we can just stop those chains from getting too heavy, then it'll never become a problem. And that is entirely possible. We can keep our kids drug-free, we can keep our future, and we can impact our community to help it become drug-free if we're willing to stop it from taking hold, willing to stop it from getting, growing roots in our communities. Now, once addiction forces its way into your life, it is incredibly powerful. As you've heard from so many of the prior speakers, I want you to take a look at what it looks like. If you have an alcoholic in your life, you know that their life will crumble around them, and they will literally continue to drink as their life continues to crumble around them. This drug is synthetic heroin, okay? It's a type of heroin that they use in Eastern Europe because they can't import regular heroin. This is an active drug user. This is not one in recovery. This is not someone that stopped using drugs. She's injected this drug into her arm, and as the flesh rots off her arm, she continues to use it. That's how powerful addiction is. You're not going to take your son or your daughter golfing and talk it out of them. You understand? We can't just simply fix this very easily. How does that befall us here in Ramsey? Does anybody recognize this? Does anybody know where this is? This is the side of the highway by Quick Check, Route 17 northbound as you come into town. This is where a lot of people first stop in Ramsey before they head home. This is also the site of very many drug violations, okay? When I drive by this site and I see some cars parked on the side there, I always pull in there because as some people might look at them as thinking they're talking on their phone or maybe they're getting directions, I think they're probably doing drugs because I'm a freak and that's the way I think, right? So I'll pull over and a lot of times I'll make the drug arrest there because they want to shoot up, they want to get high, they want to use whatever drugs they're using one last time before they drive home. And where are they driving? On the same roadways that you are all driving on. Keep that in mind. Anybody been on that crosswalk right there? Does anybody recognize that? Raise your hand if you've been there. All right, we've all been there, okay? That's Brady's, okay? This is the view from the front of my police car. And the reason I put this to you is because not too long ago, about a year ago, I'm driving over these railroad tracks, and I've got someone in the back of my car that I've just arrested for drug use. And as I'm driving along, the car in front of me throws a bunch of white packets out their window. I think most people probably would have thought that they were sweet and low, that they were sugar. But I saw something very different. And I stopped in the middle of the road, gloved up, picked them up, and they were decks of heroin. Some used, some were not used, That is not the typical way that people envision Ramsey, but it's the Ramsey that I see. And that's not depressing. It's just because I've been in and around it my entire life. And if you don't look for these things, if you don't expect them to be there, you might not see them. How many have gone shopping in the shopping center? It's also the same shopping center that we found needles, hypodermic syringes, and all types of drug paraphernalia right out in the open in the shopping center. That's Burger King. That is also the site of where 1 year ago, almost identical to where we are today, 1 year ago, an officer pulled over a car. Inside the car were two 17-year-old kids. They had just shot up on their way to school, not in Ramsey. They were going to school someplace else. But he took dozens and dozens of needles out of the car, lots of heroin out of the car, and all other types of paraphernalia. And we ended up doing it right there in the Burger King parking lot. How many have shopped in the Interstate Shopping Center? Okay, we've all been there. It wasn't long ago, just a few months ago, where I pulled up on a car that was sitting in that parking lot, and there was a man sitting in that car, and like I said, most people would think that he's reading the Inquirer, plucking his eyebrows or doing something else. I immediately assume the worst of people, right? Because that's how inspiring a person I am. What he was doing was he was about to shoot up heroin, and I walked up on him as he was about to stick the needle into his arm, and where he had prepared the heroin in his car, sitting there right in front of ShopRite, whereas on the little rest next to you on the center console, so he had his heroin, which very well could have had fentanyl in there, and in the back seat, as I was making the rest, I look, and there are the 2 car seats. Nobody was in them, but as you can see, where these 2 little kids have their feet, there was every expectation that the next day, when his 2 little girls got in that car and he went to take them to daycare, that their feet were going to be touching the exact same substance, the exact same portion of his car where the heroin and the fentanyl had laid just hours earlier. The man was 42 years old, and yes, he lives in the same town that we do, but he was struggling with a heroin addiction. He'd been struggling with that addiction for over 20 years. Okay, so there are functional heroin addicts out there. I know them personally. I've encountered them many different times. This stuff is all around us. Has anybody been to this school or know what that school looks like? Okay, it's also the same location where a couple years ago, a janitor found some suspicious items in the bushes. And one of those items was a homemade drug pipe that you could use to smoke drugs. Another one was a tin can, and in that tin can were some balloons. And in those balloons was where the person that left them there, would keep their heroin. Now, that was outside Data School, and it was a janitor that found it, but it could have easily been a kid. These things are in and around our community. They're all around us. They don't just manifest themselves in drug use and drug abuse, also the DWIs, the car burglaries that so often happen. There's just people looking for change, looking for money that they can use or sell so that they can then go and buy more drugs. And the heroin overdoses. This is not a real photo. This is just a model, okay? But I have been to those overdoses, many of those overdoses. I've administered Narcan. Several times I've administered Narcan. And unfortunately, I know people that I've loved very much that have been lost to this horrible problem. So those are ways that this problem affects our community, this very same community that we all know and love so much. And it's important that we take another view at how it is we look at our community, because these things are all around us. This is a 911 call from an 18-year-old kid who just shot up heroin with one of his friends.
911, where's the emergency? Police Hospital Lab in Ramsey, New Jersey. I have an overdose victim. All right, where? South Central? South Central. Ramsey, please, hurry. All right, what did he overdose on, sir? I think it was heroin. Heroin? Yes. How old is he? It's a she. She's 18 years old. 18 years old? All right, sir, is she breathing or not? I need to know. Yes, she is. Her eyes are open. Okay, her eyes are open. Is she responding to you? No, she's not. Talk to her. Ask her name. See if she responds. What's your name? What's your name? She's not answering. She's not answering, but she is breathing, okay? Yes. You know how long ago she took the heroin? I don't know. How long ago she took the heroin? No, all right, stay on the phone, all right? Just move your hands, please. Yeah. She stopped breathing. She stopped breathing? All right, stay on the phone. She stopped breathing. I'm going to have a CPR. All right, sir, stay on the phone, all right? I'm going to have a CPR. Just hold on 1 second. No. Stay with me. Ramsey. No. Sir, hold on 1 second. Call Ramsey on Sven, get him there. South Central, sir. Sir, she's not breathing? Sir. I don't know. All right, you put your ear next to her mouth and see if she can get to her breathing. Ramsey, South Central, unresponsive, not breathing at this time. Female party. How old? She's 18. Overdose, possibly heroin. Got it up. Then I have an ambulance and police on the way. Hurry up, please. They're on their way, sir.
It's a terribly difficult thing to hear. And when you hear something like that, you might imagine, did the person who was going through that just not think 5 minutes earlier that could happen? How is it possible that they could provide drugs to one of their best friends, someone who they obviously care very much about, watch them shoot those drugs up right in front of them, and never think to intervene, never think to protect them, never think to save them? And just 5 minutes later, they seem to care so much about that person. It's the hold that the drugs have upon us, our loved ones, and upon, unfortunately, their actions, okay? Now, I present this view to you because it's important that we see both sides of the problem. You can see the beautiful town that Ramsey is, which of course it is. a very beautiful town. I can't even afford to live here. So those of you who are sitting in these seats right now, right, you're doing something right, okay? Congratulations for that. And your town is a wonderful, incredible place to live, partially because of the fact that we're standing here right now. But it can be seen in two very different ways, okay? Now, last year, Sean led the department in arrests, okay? And most of those arrests were drug-related arrests. He made over 30 arrests last year. That's because Sean learned to see this town in a way that's different than most people learn to see the town. I work with 35 guys. Most of those police officers that I work with do not make drug arrests. Some of them made less than 3, some made 0. It depends upon how you see the world as you drive through it. Do you want to see it? Is it really there? In your mind, it matters how you see the world because two very different people will see the world in very different ways. We have to begin to see this world that's around us because the more we overlook it, the more we neglect it, the more we push it off to the side, the less chance we have at addressing it. Who sees the old lady? Can you raise your hand? Okay. Who sees the young lady? Okay. Who sees both? Congrats to you who can see both. Most people tend to see the world in one way, okay, and they have trouble seeing it in the other way. I've developed a way over the years to see it in both ways. Very important, the good plus the bad. Okay, we have to be able to see that because they're both around us, and we can't steer away from the bad and into the good if we don't know where both exist. So this problem continues, and there are areas of the country where it has gotten much worse. Can you believe it? The statistics that we've heard so far, do you believe that they get worse? Here's how they get worse. If you continue to follow down the path that we're going on, and we do not intervene, or much worse, if we stab at it hopelessly, helplessly, randomly, worse things can happen. Culture has changed, as the acting prosecutor has identified, and it's continuing to change in certain areas in much different ways than we need to change in order for it to get better. As we get towards a cultural outlook, that drug use is fine, that it's not really bad, that as long as you don't let it get out of control, it's going to be okay. We have the tiger by the tail. We know that we're not going to arrest our way out of this problem, but in that same sentence, as Mark and so many other people in this room, so many of the hundreds of drug people that I've known that are in recovery, people that are experiencing drug addiction and are in recovery, these success stories very often do start with an arrest. They very do often start with a legal intervention. So we can't overlook the fact that there is a very important role for that to play. So as we let these things get out of control, we have to understand that the more we let them get out of control, the less control we have over them and this problem. And this is where it's going in other parts of the country that have been wrestling with this further. We're going to have marijuana legalization in New Jersey later on this year, right? And very few of us saw that coming 5 or 6 years ago. While Oregon, Washington, California, those states have been there before us. And where are they going now? How many of you knew that Oregon recently introduced legislation into their actual state government to legalize all drugs, including heroin and methamphetamine? How many of you knew that in Washington it's de facto legal for you to use heroin, possess it, in several parts of their states now? So as a police officer right now, if I'm driving along and I see somebody blow a red light and I pull them over and it's your son or daughter and that son or daughter is about to use heroin for the first time, thank God, because I can see what's in their car. And because I know what maybe you don't know, I can catch that and I can identify it and maybe I can intervene and I can take some effective action that might prevent that person from that course of behavior. In certain parts of Washington, they can't do that anymore. Because if they catch your son or daughter on their way to shoot up and he looks into their car and he sees the little deck of heroin or maybe the little bottle cap that I see in one way that most people don't, he can't intervene. Son, are you about to go shoot up heroin? Yes, sir, I am about to shoot up heroin, but I'm going to a state-funded safe injection site. So you can't arrest me. You can't stop me. And he has to let him go. Where he will then go and shoot up heroin in front of a nurse that the taxpayers have paid for, and that nurse will not stop him from doing it. So that important, critical point of intervention has been taken from them. And if our policies get too out of control, if we're not able to keep them on point, that is the direction that we could head in. And how does that manifest for you? For some of us that aren't in that specific circle. How many of your kids play soccer? In certain parts of those same states, on the Saturdays and Sundays, you will see parents wearing orange vests, walking the fields, the soccer fields, before their kids play. Why? Because they're removing the used heroin needles from the fields before their kids go out there. And if we are not careful, if we continue down a path that leads us in the wrong direction, we could end up here. This is a video. It's a very disturbing video to watch, and so I'm not going to show it here, given the audience. But when you watch this video, what you would see is a man taking heroin. He puts it into his bottle cap with some water. He draws the heroin up into the syringe, sticks it into his arm, and he injects the heroin. And then he hears a noise. And when he hears that noise, he jumps up. He looks around real quick. He takes his heroin kit and throws it under the desk. He then wipes his hand over the injection site, smears it on the nice, pretty molding behind him, sucks some blood out of the wound, and then he runs out of the room. The most terrible thing about this video is it's my home office. What happened here is that there were some people working on my bathroom, and what I was doing is vacationing with my family. But because I am a freak, I have cameras everywhere in my house. And I came up from the pool, and I get a video alert. Someone's in your home office. Why would that be? And I was able to watch this guy on my cameras go through all my medicine cabinets. Instead of working on my bathroom, he goes up into my home office and he injects heroin. This is not a victimless crime. And there are more people that need to be protected than the ones who need help. We all need help with this problem. Now, this man threw his kit under that desk. 5 steps to the left is my baby girl's bedroom. 5 steps to the right is my son's bedroom. That is not my house anymore. I still live there. But every night I go up and I kiss my kids goodnight. Every night we pray and we kiss each other goodnight. And every night I pass that office where I know that somebody shot up heroin and took my house from me. And it spreads to other areas of our lives as well, because unfortunately when this problem affects our loved ones, it affects us as well. Okay, there are tangents that spread out all around us, and we have to be aware of that if we're going to address it. And it's important for me to address here, since we're going to address this problem, we have to acknowledge heroin abuse and use is not on an island in and of itself. It has tentacles that sprawn out, and it has tributaries that feed into it, right? Well, if we're going to address this, we can start addressing some of those tributaries. We can start knocking off some of those things that feed into it. The good news is this: if people are going to start using a drug, one of the very last drugs for them to ever start using is heroin. Very few people ever wake up in the morning, as Mark said, and say, you know what, I'm going to shoot up heroin today. It's not the way it works. They go through many different other types of drugs before they get there. And the age of onset for a heroin user is 26 years old. It's about the oldest that we have. That's kind of good news, because it means that there is some room for us to intervene. People start using alcohol, the average age of onset is about 17 years old, okay? So what this means for us is that there's a place where we can get in here and we can hopefully try to address it. I've lost, there we go. We can hopefully try to address it before it gets there. Alcohol, nicotine, marijuana, those other types of drugs, as people begin to get involved in them, those give us chances to intervene. Because when a young person gets involved in those other drugs, what they're manifesting is neurological or behavioral disorders that may predispose them to drug use. They're manifesting genetic or socialized vulnerabilities because of the way they grew up, or because of the way they were born with a genetic predisposition, and they're manifesting that when they get involved in these other drugs earlier on. They're developing emotional or psychological triggers that instigate drug use further on. Those are chances for us to intervene when someone has a problem with nicotine, with marijuana, or alcohol early on. We can intervene then. And if we don't intervene then, what happens is it gets much worse. They initiate and develop pro-drug attitudes. They initiate and reinforce pro-drug associations. Their friends, their groups, the people that they associate with, all are around the same thing, in the same interest. They develop familiarity and a tolerance for other drugs. When you first hit that cigarette, boy, you get a buzz. The first time you hit nicotine, it gives you a euphoric buzz. And then after a couple of weeks of use, what happens? The buzz goes away. Where are we going to go? How do we get it back? Right down the line. And we climb that ladder steadily. So now we talk about how terrible this epidemic is, and we know that it is. In 2016, we lost 60,000 Americans, mothers, brothers, fathers, sons, daughters, to heroin abuse. In that very same year, 66,000 were lost to the excessive use of alcohol. 88,000 to the excessive use of alcohol. In that same year, 480,000 died due to the influence of tobacco. So these other drugs do have a very critical role to play, not only in and of themselves in the fate that befalls our community members, but also when it comes to heroin abuse, opiate abuse. I was asked to touch quickly on vaping. The most important thing that I think I can address with vaping is this right here. Vaping is a potent and discreet drug delivery system. Please do not think of it in anything but that, okay? What do we associate this substance with? What type of drug? Nicotine? How about this one? Anyone? Marijuana? How about this one? Pills? And this one? Why we're here today, heroin. Cocaine? Anyone? Okay, methamphetamine, crack, LSD, an oldie but a goodie. Okay, let's say Molly, some synthetic drugs. What do we associate this with? All of them. All of them. You can vape any of those drugs. And kids are vaping all of those drugs. So please do not think the next time you see someone with a vape in their hand that it's guaranteed to be nicotine, and it certainly is not vapor water. This is another class for another day, but I was asked to introduce that to you, so I want to make sure that we address that here today. How we find people experimenting and using opiates is basically going to start with prescription pills, you know, the Oxycontins, the painkillers, the benzodiazepines, stuff like that. And how they typically use them is first by ingesting them, and then the next stage, they put them on a piece of foil. Right? Hold the straw up to the foil, light it on fire, and they inhale the vapor because it's a quicker, stronger high. So what we can look for as friends, family members, community members, are the signs of that. A crumpled up piece of foil with some burn marks on it, some residue on it. If we found that in a car console, in a trash can, that's an indication maybe we have somebody that's climbing the ladder. Alcohol, nicotine, marijuana, maybe right to the pain pills that they were taking. That's what it looks like close up. So if we see people using prescription painkillers, it might be comforting for you to know only about 4% of people actually progress from a painkiller like OxyContin onto opiate abuse, heroin abuse. That's a small number proportionately. But when you take that nationwide, of course, it is a very big number. And it is a very significant route to opiate addiction. So what we're looking for are people that are using OxyContin, Vicodin, or Demerol for non-medical reasons, right? Recreational reasons. So when somebody begins to take a pill for a reason that is not associated with the acute treatment of some type of an injury or an ailment, that should be a problem for us. Hey, Mom, can I bum a Xanax? Hey, man, let me get an Oxy. Stuff like that. When we start to hear or see that type of behavior, that's when we know that someone has progressed beyond the medical use. Benzodiazepines, Xanax, Klonopin, Valium, Ativan, those are other drugs that also form the gateway, the predominant gateway towards opiate abuse. Where are they getting them? From us, from family members, from grandparents, from our homes, our houses, from our medicine cabinets. And if they don't do it that way, they can buy them, or they can get their own prescription, right? They can go to the doctor and tell them that their leg is hurt, my back is injured. But when that injury begins to become prolonged and they're continuing to medicate themselves for it, that's when we have to step in and say, you know what? Let me talk to your doctor real quick. Take me to the office because I want to make sure that you still need to be on these horrible, these very heavy painkillers, okay? Another interesting but subtle sign that you might need to be aware of is if somebody begins to suddenly initiate high levels of nicotine use or they increase their nicotine use, strongly associated with opiate abuse and heroin use. Now, to what extent? About 86% of people who are using opiates and using heroin, for some reason they smoke. Okay? I'm not 100% sure, but those are the statistics. And of those in treatment, 97%, almost every person that's in treatment for heroin addiction or opiate addiction is a smoker, okay? Because it helps, in some cases, with the recovery process. So if you saw someone dramatically increase their nicotine intake or begin smoking when they didn't just a little while ago and suddenly they're smoking every day, that's a very clear sign that we have a problem that we need to talk about. The use of methadone and Suboxone, these are drugs that we use to help curb substance abuse and addiction, help get people on the right track, stop them from getting sick, help stop the cravings. They are also abused. So oftentimes I'll find these things in somebody's wallet, I'll find these things in their purse or something like that, and it's something that we need to be aware of. If that was to fall out before today, you might think it was a wet nap. You might think it was something to clean your hands with, but that's to help us keep well, okay? Suboxone in that little wrapper there. DXM, those two 17-year-olds that I talked to you about that we pulled over because our eyes are open, we see things that not everybody's going to see. We got into those two 17-year-olds' car in the girl's purse. She had 5 bottles of DXM, Robitussin. Why was she using it? Her high school campus that she was going to was locked in. Once you arrived at that campus, you couldn't get out. So what she was doing is she found out that DXM decreases dope sick. It stops you from getting sick during the day. So what she would do is she would shoot up before she would go to class, and then she would go to class, and after every period, she would hit the DXM, the Robitussin, to help get her through the day until she could shoot up again after school. How is that useful to us? Easter's coming up. You may know people that are going to be spending time with their families, and they're not going to be able to sneak away and shoot up, and if they are having a problem, and maybe it's too obvious for them to be popping pills, you might notice them sipping on the cough syrup. You might notice something like that that you would not have noticed if you hadn't been here today at this seminar with us. It's a very subtle cue. Now, every time somebody uses cough syrup, are we going to like pry their eyes open to examine their pupils, right? Are we going to haul them down to the police department? Of course not. But these are important things for some of us that may be expecting something to actually see what we're looking for. The use of cleansing products for those who are in recovery or those who are trying to avoid detection from their employer or from other areas. If they use daily cleansing products like this Serto, like Golden Root, or like some of the detox things. If you see them using those things on a daily basis because they're trying to stay clean on drug tests, I would be aware of them. The use of synthetic opiates like Xanax. Okay, Phenazepam is widely available. You can get it just to spritz under the tongue, and it's a synthetic form of benzodiazepine, okay? And you can use that to help get you through the day. Where do they typically store these things? I told you to buckle up, right? I've only taken 2 breaths since I've been up here, right? Where do they typically come? Well, when I tend to find them, they're in pill bottles, okay? They're in old pill bottles. So Tommy got amoxicillin for an eye infection, 5 years ago. He kept the bottle, and he's got the pills in there. Or he's got the pills in an Altoid case. Now, how do you distinguish that? If you find pills on somebody's person, you could just go online to drugs.com, and they have a pill identifier there. Never be confused by what you see on the side of a pill. You can diagnose it very quickly, very easily. Type in what the imprint is, what shape it was, what color it is, and you will know exactly what they're taking. If they tell, I swear, it's only Advil, you'll know in a heartbeat if you simply look it up. This is what a heroin bag looks like when it's brand new and it's unopened. This is what it looks like when I tend to see them. You'll find the bags ripped open in half. You find these tucked between the center console and the front seats of a car. You'll find these in the trash can. You'll find these sometimes in the driveway when they get out the car and they leave them on the floor. That's what it looks like with some little off-white brown powder on the bottom. Again, that's what a brand new one will look like. That's what it looks like when it's in a bundle. Again, important for us to know if we look at it. Where do I find it? Typically in wallets. Boys and girls, typically I find it during prisoner searches or probable cause searches. They have it tucked between a credit card, behind the license. It's in little folds of the wallet. Boys and girls, that's where I tend to find it. So that's where you would look too if you're looking for it. They even make a credit card now. because they want to help us with this stuff. So they make a credit card that breaks open. It's a fake credit card. It has a little Ziploc bag on it, so when you're storing your heroin in your wallet, you can put it into that credit card, zip it up, and then if somebody's just flipping through your wallet, it looks like it's just a credit card. The second most common spot is in a box of cigarettes. Like I said, for some reason, smoking is directly associated, or commonality with it. I'm not saying causality, commonality with it, with opiate abuse and heroin use. And I tend to find this stuff inside the little glassine bag of a box of cigarettes. Now, what are some other things that you can look for? Needles are conspicuous. Most people who are using heroin and opiates, they don't want their needles to be left around, and so they do a pretty good job of cleaning them up. But what you'll find is these little cotton balls. All right, in the bottle cap over there, you'll see that there's a cotton ball in there, a little tiny Q-tip sized cotton ball. It'll be discolored typically. It'll be wet in the past, and they keep those. They tend to keep those around. Sometimes you find 20, 30 of them in a spot. You tend to find those things. Maybe you'll find the caps. The big cap goes over the plunger on the needle. The small cap goes over the top, and I tend to find those things where you walk into somebody's room, they're in their waste can, or they're in the floorboards of their car, stuff like that. Those are warning signs. What do you look for as far as their lifestyle? Well, if you know someone, love someone who you think is changing in certain ways, and what you might be seeing is heroin taking control over their life, heroin taking control of their decisions and their priorities. What are some things that you could look for that might indicate that they have a problem? Decreased physical activity, decreasing hygiene, failing at school or fired from work. Those tens of responsibilities tend to begin to suffer before anything else does. Careless injuries. I was at a girl's house 1 week ago from today. She was abusing Xanax, okay? She hasn't yet moved to heroin that we think she's abusing Xanax. She had burn marks all over the side of her neck. Why? She was trying to do her hair. She's just trying to curl her hair, but because she's on the benzo, she couldn't feel the pain right away, and because she's so clumsy and out of it, she was burning the heck out of the side of her neck as she's doing so. So those types of clumsy injuries are the types of things that we see with people who are abusing these types of drugs. You'll find like little injuries on their fingers, little burn marks and stuff like that. Look for those careless injuries that don't have an explanation. Repeatedly lost or stolen cell phones. I know people from town, they go through 3 cell phones inside of a week because they keep selling their cell phone, pawning their cell phone, because it's very easy to convert a cell phone to drugs. So if somebody goes through 2 or 3 cell phones, they're always losing it. That's a good sign. If there's change disappearing from your house or your car, if there's valuables stolen or missing, right? We know that. If they've sold their own stuff. If there's stains on their sleeves, when I tend to be interacting with someone who has a heroin problem and they're pretty much deep into it, I find stains on their lap, stains on where they would sit and they would shoot up, stains on their sleeves from when they would roll their sleeves up over the track marks, little marks on their clothing there. They have a narrowing social circle because they've been closed down and they only begin to associate with other people who are doing that type of behavior into that activity. And you might see them begin to associate very commonly with those who you think and you've always thought have had a little bit of a brush with the dark side. They're involved in property crime, shoplifting, or theft. They take rides at strange times. You see Uber, if mom gave the Uber account to their son or daughter, what they might see is strange Uber rides from different places. Or they're asking you to come pick them up because they got with a group of people. And when they were going, they either got kicked out or everybody else has crashed out. And so they're asking you to come get them. Don't ask any questions, okay? Just come get me. Increased travel on the train to Patterson or Newark. If you saw the physical symptoms, narcotic analgesics typically constrict the pupils, right, especially when they're acute, so that's what a normal pupil might look like. That's what one might look like if somebody was under the influence of a narcotic analgesic, like an opiate, and you're looking for that slow, sly eye movements. You're looking for pinpoint pupils along with saggy posture. They do the slouch walk, okay? Typically, if somebody's under the influence, their hands and their arms just hang down at their sides. They have terrible posture, and they kind of shuffle when they walk, okay? That's what I tend to see when they're on opiates, when they're under the influence. And as we bring it home, forgive me as I rush through these last couple points here because I want to make sure that we have time for other speakers. Looking for those soft, monotonous voices. If you talk to them, they might give you a very non-committal, slow answer. Hey, what'd you do today? I did nothing. And very soft, right? And maybe they'll start to nod while they're talking to you. They'll fall asleep literally while they're talking to you. They call that being on the nod. The injection marks, either on the inside of the forearm, sometimes on the back of the hand. You're looking for those types of things. Sometimes you find out where they've been tied off, okay? If you have somebody that's appearing as though they're under the influence, you might not see the injection marks. A lot of times I can't see the injection marks, but you might see a band around their arm where they've tied off if you ask them to show you their arm. Be careful, as this is the last slide. When you're endeavoring to intervene in a cycle of abuse and a cycle of drug use like this, know that you're dealing with something that's very dangerous, okay? Police officers, school officials, and many others have been hospitalized because in their good intents to get involved, they've come in contact with a substance that's extremely dangerous. Synthetic heroin, carfentanil, is responsible for 176 overdoses in a 5-day period in one city, Cincinnati, okay? If you come in contact with that stuff, it's transdermal. It goes right through your skin. So if you ever do find yourself investigating something like that, make sure you glove up. Make sure you protect yourself from what could harm both you and the loved one that you're trying to intervene with. They even make it in Pez candy now. Not the Pez candies that you're buying, of course, but because they don't want police officers to find it, they stamp it into Pez candy, or they make a counterfeit pill like a Xanax bar. They'll stamp fentanyl or carfentanil into something that looks like a pill. And so you might think that you're just reaching in and picking up a Xanax pill, which is not transdermal, but because it's fentanyl or carfentanil, it is. So don't take any chances. We're here for the right reasons. Each and every one of you is a stone cold hero for being here today, young and old, when you could be anywhere else. You know what I'm saying? So my hats are off to all of you. God bless you all, and thank you for taking an active role in correcting this problem.
Hi, is this on? Okay. Hi, I'm Jenica Siniscalco. I'm the Student Assistance Coordinator over at Don Bosco Prep. I have the honor of introducing Gail Cole, our last speaker, and I will tell you, I was recently at a wake for 2 young women who lost their mother to this disease, and the thought of losing a child to this disease it sounds even more heartbreaking than being young women losing their mother, although it's equally as awful. Gail has been tireless in her efforts to educate and advocate around the dangers of opiates and the impact of opiates on families and communities ever since her family was directly affected by opiate addiction and loss. She's helped form the Hope and Healing After Addiction Death group that meets monthly here in Allendale. She works tirelessly with the prosecutor's office to educate students in schools all around the county around the dangers of opiate addiction. So it's with my pleasure that I introduce to you Gail Cole.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to thank the Ramsey Junior Women's Club for hosting this and for the student assistant counselors and for all of you for being here. I've done a lot of these in the evening and with the prosecutor's office, and sometimes 5 people will show up. So, you know, I applaud you for being here and for, you know, wanting to educate yourself. As Jenica said, my name is Gail, and this is my son, Brendan. He was my firstborn. He had this incredible energy about him. He was just full of life, had this awesome smile, this crazy laugh. He was an incredible friend to everyone. He was a brother, a cousin, a grandson, a son. And unfortunately, on January 4th of 2014, he died from an accidental heroin overdose. And he wasn't in the streets of Patterson. He wasn't in a dark alley. He was in his bedroom in our house in Allendale. And, you know, back in 2014, he was the first overdose of 2014, and I remember seeing something, and it was Brendan's picture. It was my girlfriend, her daughter, Kate, and somebody from Ramsey, and they were the new faces of addiction. And the reason I share his story, it's not that his story is so special or that it's so unique, but in 2014, nobody was talking about it. And, you know, when I found out about his addiction, I remember feeling so much stigma and shame and feeling so alone. You know, just to share his story a little bit, I consider him to be your typical Bergen County kid. We lived in Midland Park. We moved to Allendale. He went to Brookside School. He chose to go to Bergen Catholic because he wanted the discipline of a Catholic school. Don't know many people that actually choose that, but that was Brendan. He thought that he would thrive with the structure. And he had great friends. He had a wonderful experience there. He was a lacrosse goalie. You know, he's in the National Honor Society. He did all that community service, everything that a regular Bergen County kid did. And he got into his dream college. He went to University of Richmond, and he was thrilled. I take a little break, and I always tell people that despite how confident Brendan looked, he looked like he had it all. He was, you know, he just, you know, he was confident. He was very put together. But that's not how he really felt on the inside. From the time he was young, he was diagnosed with ADHD, and he had some depression, some anxiety. But we really were in tune with that. He was, you know, seeing doctors, and, you know, we were very aware of it and very in tune with him. And, you know, our goal was really to set him up so that his self-esteem was intact and that he had the best chance possible to be as successful as he could. And so he did. You know, we thought, he graduated Bergen Catholic, and I thought, wow, we got through unscathed. I'm good. And he went away to college. And again, I knew all his friends. If you were one of Brendan's friends, you had no choice but to be friends with his parents. They called me Mama Cole, and I would get, hey, Mama Cole, you want to come to my frat party? I'm like, I don't really know if you want me. They're like, oh, no, come on. And that was just Brendan. So he called every day, and we thought we knew what was going on. What we didn't know was that he started experiment with opiate pain pills. He was prescribed opiates. He had a surgery before going away to college. He was prescribed them. I do remember him taking them, and at one point I thought he was feeling well enough, and he goes, hey, I think I need another one. I said, no, hey, I think you don't. I think you're just fine. Let's do the Advil Tylenol routine, and took them away. And then when he was in college, he was also prescribed opiates again. He had his tonsils out, and they gave him Tylenol with codeine and Oxy. Why you would be able to swallow Oxy if you have to take liquid, Tylenol with codeine, I don't know. And I don't even remember filling that. But I did, because I found the old prescription in my house. And so he liked the way they felt when he took them, but he did not become addicted at that point. He did start with experimentation, and unfortunately, we didn't know. And it wasn't until he was starting his second semester, his last semester of college. It was January of 2013. He had lunch with his grandmother. She lives in Hasbrook Heights. And she called us and said, he's on his way home. Something's wrong. He just doesn't look right. I don't know if he has a flu. He's getting sick. And he walked in the house after stepping out of the car from driving from Hasbrook Heights to Allendale, and I'd never seen anyone look like that. He was pale, he was sweating, he was nodding, he was nasty, aggressive, swearing at us. And after prodding him for several hours, he admitted that he had what he called a little pill problem. And he did not share with us how bad the problem was, and I did not have this knowledge in 2013. Sure, I knew what they were, but I didn't know how addictive they were. We came to find out after the fact that at that point he had been a heroin addict. So we made the decision to send him back, again, not knowing how bad it was, and it took me a week to find a specialist down at Richmond, and he went back, and he was seeing this gentleman twice a week. His roommates were drug testing him, making him pee in the cup. His brother was at the same college. He told all his fraternity brothers, so he had all eyes on him, and he started playing lacrosse again for basically a team that was transitioning into a Division I, and he was their only goalie. And I thought, wow, this is great. He's, got his love of lacrosse. He's back on the right track. And there were a few things, that, I call them incidences. I won't say signs. But he graduated, and we thought everything was okay, and he came home, and his brother had been searching his room because he made it his job that he was going to save his brother. And in his closet, he found a Build-A-Bear teddy bear, and it had the seam ripped out of it, and inside of it were some old heroin baggies and a needle. And I thought, oh my God, heroin in Allendale? Like, it didn't register. And I still don't think, that I thought he was a heroin addict. So again, we got him the help that we thought he needed, and he was seeing specialists, working the 12 steps, doing everything we thought, and somehow he managed to use and got arrested twice in 5 days at the end of the summer. And he did go into treatment. He didn't really have a choice because now, you're facing jail time. And he went to what I did a lot of research and thought was a really great rehab. Unfortunately, it was a 30-day program, and if you are suffering from an opiate addiction, 28, 30 days is a joke because it takes 12 to 18 months for your brain to get back to normal when you stop using. So long-term treatment is what's really needed. But again, didn't have that knowledge. I always say, I wish I knew then what I know now. So after he got out, he looked like $1 million. He looked amazing. He was just back to himself. His skin looked clear. Everything about him, he just seemed so present. And he agreed to, go to sober living. And he was there for about 7 weeks, and he got kicked out for failing to take a drug test. And there were a few things. Again, you could just hear some old, the old rerun of some bad habits and some, falling back into his ways. And he came home right before Thanksgiving, and that started the war zone that your house becomes when you're living with an addict. He needed help, but of course, he didn't really think he had an addiction. He thought, I got this. I don't need help. What are they going to tell me that I don't already know? I got control of this. And unfortunately, as I'm sure Mark could tell you, that you don't ever have control over this drug. This drug controls every aspect of your being. So a lot of screaming, yelling. I wasn't referred to as mom. I was referred to some other words that I won't mention today. And somehow we got through the holidays, and I thought, okay, maybe things are good. And the day before, January 3rd, he worked a temp job. And again, my husband called me. He goes, have you ever seen him look better? He looks amazing. So I picked him up, and he said, can I borrow the car? I want to go to Garden State Plaza to look for something. And I thought, what could he possibly do? We were so smart. We put a tracking device in his car because we were going to catch him and we were going to stop him. And so he went to Garden State Plaza, and he came back 45 minutes later, and I said, B, it's so nice to have you back. And he looked at me, he goes, thanks, Mom. Thanks for giving me another chance. And as those words come out of his mouth, I think, holy crap, he's high. How did that happen? It turns out that Brendan could be very convincing. He could sell you snow in a snowstorm. And he convinced his drug dealers that they should really deliver his heroin to Neiman Marcus at Garden State Plaza. That's how easy it is to get your drugs. So the screaming, the yelling, knowing that, Saturday is now going to be my day to find a new rehab. And so we went to sleep, and my husband fell asleep on the couch, and by the grace of God, he woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning. And he found him across his bed. He was barely breathing. His lips were turning blue, and they revived him with Narcan, and he walked out the front door to the ambulance. And I remember being so incredibly pissed off, thinking, what were you thinking? Like, what did you do? And I didn't really understand the disease of addiction like I do now. So he was in the emergency room, and at 1:30 that afternoon, we got home. They couldn't make him go to detox. He didn't try to kill himself. There was no game plan. We had no idea what to do. We hadn't slept. And when we got home, I remember saying to him, the first words I said to him when he got out of the car in our garage, I said, why don't you go take a shower and try to get yourself together? And he goes, I can't. And I had no idea that it hurts to shower, it hurts to shave, it hurts to brush your teeth when you're going through withdrawals. So his door is unlocked. We told him what happened. We told him he had a second chance. Don't blow it. Not everyone's so lucky. And less than 2 hours later, his brother came home and said, where's B? And I said, he's up in his room. And he goes upstairs and screams. And we pull him off the bed. And you could actually hear the air coming out of his lungs. And they worked on him. They tried again to revive him with Narcan. But this time it didn't work. The withdrawals were so bad. At the time, we didn't know what happened. We thought he couldn't possibly have used again. We asked him. He told us he didn't, and he did. He had used again, and just like that, my son was gone. There are no real words that can describe what it is like to lose your child. I will tell you, there are some things that parents should never have to do. They should never have to find their child's lifeless body. They should never watch him being carried out of the house in a body bag, and they should never have to bury them. It's the hole in your heart, the ache, the sense of loss is so tremendous. It changes your life. It changes everything about you. Nothing will ever be the same. Somehow we get up and we move forward, but it's not the same. So I share his story because I was one of those parents who said, yeah, I'm a good parent. I started a bereavement group, as Jenica had said, and I have met some of the most incredible people. And when I think about the parents, we were all those great parents, just like all of you are. We baked the cookies. We taught them how to throw baseball. We were at every single play and event that they were, part of. We were there, family dinners, vacations, everything. And when you listen to the description of each and every child, we don't laugh, but we all say, oh my God, you just described my kid. They were all amazing kids. They were all athletes. They were artists. They were creative. They were talented. They would give you the shirt off their back. But yet this still happened to everyone. So, when you think about what is going on in this country, there are over 2 million people who are addicted to some sort of opiate. I heard that the latest number is that there are 140 people who die every single day from overdoses. And if you put that into perspective, it's like an airplane going down every day. And if you think about it, every 21 days, the equivalent of all those who died in 9/11 die from overdoses. Every 21 days. The latest numbers were that last year's numbers exceeded all those who were lost in the entire Vietnam War, more than auto accidents, and more than were lost at the peak of the AIDS epidemic. So this is a monster. And real briefly, you know, some people think, well, how did we get here? You know, how did we get to where prescription medication is killing a whole generation of our children? So in the 2-minute description, it was basically in the 1990s, somebody decided pain was the fifth vital sign and that we were grossly undertreating pain. And OxyContin came out, it was reformulated from other medication that was around, and it was heavily marketed, it was mismarketed, it was misprescribed. There were people that were quoted as saying that we thought this couldn't be used for long-term treatment of pain, but we were wrong. It should, and it could and it should be used. And only 1% of people were getting addicted. Well, that unfortunately has proved false, and in, I think, 2004, Purdue Pharma settled a $600 million lawsuit for these claims of misrepresentation, but they've continued to do exactly what they have been doing. And that's not to say that opioids don't have a place in medicine, because they do. It's just not for your routine getting your wisdom teeth taken out, for a sprained ankle, for every little thing. Because I think, as somebody said earlier, it doesn't treat your pain. If you blow out your knee, it's not making your knee get better, it's just blocking you from feeling the pain. So, you know, that is where we are now, and you talk about the ways, it's experimentation, but it's largely from the prescription pain pills. You know, I like to talk to the children a lot, not the children, the young adults, and, you know, I talk to them about, you know, that when they are at a certain age, a lot of them are freshmen, but even for the young adults who are in this audience, you are starting to make choices yourself, and, you know, your parents aren't always there. And a lot of young adults think that their parents are really stink, that, you know, our job is to stop you from having fun or doing anything meaningful in your life. But that's not it at all. What we are trying to do is make sure that you are around to have that meaningful life that you are meant to have. So when you're making your choices, it's not about, you know, whether you wear your Uggs or your Air Jordans. It's to never go down this path. You know, there's so much pressure on our kids today. It kind of breaks my heart a little bit. I like those simpler days. I have a friend in the audience. We were on the swim team when we were 12 years old. We spent our summers just kind of hanging around, and it was just a simpler life. But our kids are faced with so much, so they have choices to make. One of the other things I just wanted to bring up is in meeting with all the people in my bereavement group, there is a very common theme that a lot of people suffered from mental illness. So mental illness and addiction do go hand in hand, whether it's things as, you know, self-esteem, or it's depression, it's anxiety. But they had something within them that they didn't know how to handle. And so, you know, for as long as people can remember, people have turned to drugs and alcohol, suicide. You have kids cutting themselves now to try to deal with that pain. If you are one of those young adults and you are feeling that way, you need to ask for help, because drugs, alcohol, they're only going to numb that pain, and you have a wonderful life ahead of you. You need to really think about what you're putting into your body. Even if you're at a young age and you think you need Red Bull to wake up in the morning, you don't. You have to really think about what you're doing. You have a wonderful life ahead of you. If you go down this path, you don't always get a do-over. I remember playing Chutes and Ladders myself and with my kids. So if you're a young adult, I don't know if you had that, but you're playing Chutes and Ladders and you are rocking Chutes and Ladders. You are up near the top, and all of a sudden you land on number 84 and you go all the way back down to almost the bottom, and you're thinking, oh crap, I just lost Chutes and Ladders. But you have a second chance, because somebody else could fall down and somebody else could get down to the bottom, and I've gone down 84 and I've still won Chutes and Ladders. The problem with this is that you don't always get a do-over. The do-over if you're lucky, comes in the form of finding recovery. And I think it's really important for people to know that, addiction isn't a death sentence. It most surely has led that way for many, many people. But there is recovery. It is a lot of work. It is every single day. Don't go down this path, though, because you don't know if you're that person. Brendan didn't know that he was going to be that addicted person. I have 2 other sons. They do not have, they are not suffering from the disease of addiction. It's a disease, it needs a lot of treatment. If you know somebody, you need to stand up and say something. A lot of Brendan's friends feel really guilty because they knew something was going on, but they certainly didn't know that he was using heroin. Heroin is a very lonely drug. You do it by yourself. You like the euphoria of feeling nothing when whatever inside of you is causing so much pain. And at the end, Brendan felt like he had no friends. Sadly, at his wake, 1,000 people were there, and people then, I said, do you see what you meant to people? But he didn't, because that's the disease of addiction. That's the deception of his perception, as one of my good friends, Ben, says. So, I just urge you to, if you are getting prescriptions, that you talk to your doctors. If you're a young adult, get help if you are feeling that something is off. And just know that, you don't have to be like everyone else. You don't have to be the star of the football team. You don't have to be, the valedictorian. It's okay to be you, even if that means being different. You have to just accept who you are, and you have to know that you have support around you, that your family loves you. Brendan's birthday was just last Thursday, and it was a really tough day for me. I remember, as all the parents out here, I'm sure, who have children, remember that day that your child was born. And it was just such an incredibly joyful moment, day. You look at this miracle that you brought into the world. And I have that. But then I have all the other images I have of Brendan's death, of burying him. The 2 don't belong in the same photograph. They don't belong in the same lifetime. It's not natural at all. And, so for me, I don't get to spend time with him. I didn't get to bake him his favorite cake, and he loved presents. I didn't get to buy him all the gifts that he liked. I got to go to the cemetery and put flowers on his grave. And as a parent, that's probably about the crappiest way you could spend time. I'm just going to close reading something that I had found, and it's just very short, but it was written by somebody who is in recovery, and it is called A Letter from Heaven. And I've read it to my bereavement group, and so it resonates with people who have lost. It resonates with people who are living with an addict. It resonates with parents who haven't lost somebody, to help you understand the depth of this addiction. Dear Mom and Dad, words can't begin to describe how sorry I am. I put you in a position that no parent should ever face. I left before you. It wasn't supposed to be this way. The natural order of things was skewed by my addiction. I can only imagine the agony you must be in. I know you're angry, despairing, and sad all at the same time. If only you could reach back in time and pluck me from the path I'd chosen, but you can't, you never could. God knows you tried. I wasn't completely oblivious to all you did for me. I always believed I had time. And the truth is, I was too damn smart for my own good. I underestimated the power of my disease. I know you tried to tell me this, but I wouldn't listen. After I began using drugs, I became desensitized. I thought I was immortal. I liked living on the edge. I felt so alive. Drugs filled a place in me that nothing else could. With them, I was king. Without them, well, I was just me. And maybe that was part of the problem. I never did feel right about being me. I always needed something more. I felt entitled to nice things, to the best. I hated waiting. When I wanted something, all I could do was think about it until I got it, and then I wanted something else. There were times I felt guilty for the stress I created in our family, but it was fleeting. The burning need inside of me was greater than anything else. This need had no conscience, integrity, or morals. This need was my addiction. I know I hurt you, I rejected your love, I rolled my eyes, I called you names, I stole from you, lied to you, I avoided you, and finally I left you for good. I was so smug. There wasn't anything you could have said or done to prevent this from happening. I thought I knew it all. Death by overdose was something that happened to others, foolish people, people who didn't know crap about using. It wouldn't happen to me, no way, no how, not ever. You begged me to stop, I tuned you out. Your words were like wasps in my ears. Although they stung, they were nothing more than an annoying buzz. When you cried, I cringed. When you put your arms around me, I want it back. I want it away from you. And now I want back, but there is no back, there's only forward. So, I just urge all of you to, love your kids, be involved in their life, and if they have a problem, fight like hell to get them the help they need. There is help out there. But again, if you can just not go down this path, you'll be better off. To all you kids, I will tell you, you have a whole great life ahead of you. If you are in a box in the ground, you are not going to have that great life. Thank you.
Okay, so we just want to do a last call for the Q&A questions, and they're being handed over here by all of the SAD students. I also, just in case anybody missed, there was some resources at the registration table. If you saw the little card, it was created with all of the local numbers that you might need, including a few of the people that I'm going to introduce, and some numbers that you can call. We didn't get to discuss in full like we wanted to, vaping. We have an informational packet on there with some of the examples, some details, some health concerns that can be from that too. So we heard a lot of compelling information. The speakers are amazing, so I definitely want to thank them. What I heard and what I took from it is it can happen to anyone. As Mark had said, you might feel it's in your DNA, or he felt it was in his DNA, that it's, like Tim said, it's 100% preventable. We know that the numbers, like the acting prosecutor said, the numbers are increasing in our county, our state, and it's a national epidemic. The education is key, and as Gail mentioned, it can happen to your family, and the effects on the family is devastating. So knowing your resources are so important. So with that, I definitely want to recognize a few people and introduce some of the resources that you have for our community and our families. So I'm going to ask our planning committee from the juniors to come up, starting with Shelley Emery, myself. Shelley is the president of the Junior Ramsey Club, Tricia Heppes, and Isabella. And it's our honor to thank those that we could not have brought this to you without, and of course our resources to you. So I'm going to start with Officer Sean Beeman. Come up to the stage. Sean is the head of our lead team and is the person that we brought this to. So last October, it sounded like such a long time ago that this first idea to host this event came to our board. And as soon as we brought it to Sean and Tim, they ran with it and were so, so passionate. I'm also going to introduce our student counselors, assistant counselors at Don Bosco and Ramsey High School, Jenica and Sunny Roberts. And this is their their SAD teams, which is Students Against Destructive Decisions. And so they're the representatives in the high school, and they stand up and bring this to our students. So I cannot say enough about the passion of this team to bring this to you and the resources that we had. But I also want to recognize, and their names and their contact numbers are in the resource card. But also, I would like a few people in the audience to stand up that were either a resource to us, but potentially are a resource to you. So I have, and forgive me if I forget anybody. I also, of course, want to thank the bosses. So Chief Gurney, Dr. Murphy, both principals of the schools for helping us and giving all our resources and allowing this team the time and the resources to bring this to you. So with that, I would like Pam Coles from Knockout Opiates to stand up. Pam Coles partners with Partnership for Drug-Free New Jersey, and she brings Knockout Opiates, which is a governor's initiative to bring opiate awareness to schools directly, and they are going all through New Jersey. So if you ever wanted any assistance or to want to volunteer, definitely get with Pam. I also want to recognize, and stay standing up, Sarah from the Ramsey Drug and Alcohol Alliance, if they're here. Also the team from the Wawa Alliance. Yes, please stand up if you're here. MAWA is hosting 2 events this month, one on vaping and one about how to prescribe the correct medication to youth injuries. So that's in our local area as well. Also, all of the council with Dr. Murphy and the Stigma Free, their council, their committee, and their volunteers, as well as all of the vendors that we brought here today, which is Bergen Promise, Specialized Therapy Associates, West Bergen, Mental Health, Pony Power, High Focus, Care Plus, and Eileen, who does some of our partnership here with the Academy and the school for sure, New Bridge Medical Center, Teen Thrive, High Focus, which I did mention, New Life Recovery Center. So there is also a lot of educators, counselors, school nurses that have come here today, and these are our resources. So I thank you every day for what you do for our students and our parent education. So with that, I'm going to turn over the Q&A.
Actually, I'm going to step in. Sorry, I'm going to, just quickly. So I just want to thank Marie, because this was, started as her brainchild, and she truly is the driving force behind how all the people on stage got together, the speakers came together. We can't thank you guys enough for taking time out of your day and coming, and for all of you that came. Marie spent tireless hours. I mean, I can't tell you, all night long we were getting feedback. She really wanted to make sure that this was what it was today, and so thank you. And now I will turn over to Sean for Q&A. So if we can have the speakers come back up. Do you want to talk about this? Oh.
Just as we introduce the speakers back up, a round of applause for them. And secondly, come on right up. Because we are running out of time, we are going to answer the most pertinent questions today. If your question does not come up, or you would like a summary of all of the Q&As that get answered today and the ones have not, please register at the registration desk. If you have registered online, you will automatically be getting a copy of those. Maybe not straight away, but you will eventually. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
I got a lot of room.
No, go ahead. You talk longer than I did. Sit down.
All right, we appreciate you guys
You have to
coming and
teach
hang out
me
with
how
us
to
tonight.
talk that fast.
We realize some of you have to go, but as you're leaving, wouldn't mind stopping by the vendor tables on the way out there. All right, the first question we're going to read tonight is for Mark. Mark, you said you used alcohol and marijuana first. Can you speak to the idea of gateway drugs?
Say that one more time, sorry.
It's okay. You said you used alcohol and marijuana first. Can you speak to the idea of gateway drugs?
Yeah, they're definitely gateway drugs. They're usually the first thing, you don't just, like he said as well, you don't just run right to heroin, I started with alcohol. It all started with one drink and one joint, and look at where it ended, Heroin's usually the end of the line, but I've tried everything. If I could probably give you a list of what I haven't tried, it'd be easier, and that's just how it is for me. And like you said, tobacco. I believe tobacco is the gateway drug because it's easily accessible to, the younger kids, to take a cigarette and like you said, you get that initial high, that euphoric feeling, and if you want to do it again and you want more, that's a telltale sign.
Thank you for sharing. The next question is for Gail. How can parents tailor their home environments to prevent drug use? How do parents talk to their children about drug use? And how do we recommend parents, families, and congregations talk about this topic together?
I think parents have to realize that their children are never too young to start talking about it. I know that Prosecutor Callow said that they're going to start 7th graders. It could even start younger. I think that there has to be an open line of communication. I mean, you know, kids are going to try things and they are going to make mistakes. You know, our goal is to prevent them from going down this path. I think keeping that open line of communication, and I know especially giving them an out, because they do go to parties, there is peer pressure, and some of the people, you know, the kids are like, well, what do? I don't want to look like you know, I don't want to look like a jerk that I'm going to leave. You know, there are ways you can develop a code. You could have your child text you something, and they could call, go, oh, I gotta go, there's an emergency. You know, let your kids know that if they're in a situation, they can call you and you're going to come get them, you know, and just get them out of harm's way. And I think, you know, even there are churches, you know, the whole community has to be involved in this.
Good, thank you. The next question, Sergeant Shoemaker. At what age/grade should parents start to really be aware of their children's drug exposure and use? Is it being introduced to kids younger than 6th grade now? Alternately, what is the average age guide to the start of drug use?
My son is 11 now, and let me see, 3 years ago. So when he was about 8 years old, he was watching a Minecraft video. Who knows what Minecraft is? All right. He was watching a Minecraft video, and I was listening to the audio in the background as he was listening to this, and I realized at the point where, probably 5 minutes after I should have, that they were talking about vaping, I'm not vaping, rather huffing, while they were playing Minecraft. So he was watching these videos, you know, repetitively on and on and on, all day long, really, to be honest with you, and they were talking about using drugs in these videos about Minecraft, and I just wasn't paying attention. So, you know, my kids were learning about keeping clear from drug use, alcohol, tobacco, and the more common drugs. You know, from the moment I began talking to them about crossing the street, I think you cannot talk to them about it early enough, as Gail mentioned. I think everyone up here probably agrees. And the more often we get into that stream of consciousness, the better, because it's ubiquitous. Cradle-to-grave marketing is a very real thing, and people are talking to your kids about drugs as soon as they turn on the TV. And as soon as they go to school, it blew my mind what my kids were learning about in 1st and 2nd grade from the other kids that were in school with them. And we got to be in that stream of consciousness. Was there a second part to that I'm missing? Was it about something about the age of onset?
Yes.
What was that exactly?
Alternatively, what is the average age guide to the start of drug use?
So it's different for different drugs. It's very interesting. You saw a statistic in my presentation where it talked about the average age of onset for alcohol being 17. Where I begin to worry about kids using drugs in this town in Ramsey, about 13, 14 is when I would tend to start see my low-hanging fruit start to get involved in alcohol and other drug abuse. Many kids can hang in there a lot longer, but D-Day, 100%, is that freshman year of high school. Between September and December, that freshman year of high school, that's when it's a game changer for so many of our kids. And if you're not in it, worrying about it, talking about it before then, you're way behind the times.
Thank you. Next one's from Prosecutor Gallo. What mechanisms are in place to help doctors and pharmacies identify people struggling with addiction? What is being done to doctors that are overprescribing these pain pills?
Well, of course, we do prosecute the doctors or the pharmacies that abuse the system, but the controls are really increased education for doctors. The guidelines now in New Jersey are to limit the opioid prescriptions to 5 days, generally speaking, and then you have to go back for a renewal. Doctors, however, are still fairly ignorant of the abuse in this area. I can remember last year I had some eye surgery, and doctor gave me a prescription for Percocet, 30-day supply. And I said to the doctor, well, why do I need Percocet? Why do I need a 30-day supply of Percocet? You know, these things are addictive. And his response to me was, and I hadn't known this doctor, had just been sent to him, he was a specialist. You're not an addictive personality, so you'll be fine. How did he know whether I was an addictive personality? How do I know whether I'm an addictive personality if these drugs react differently on different people? I could take a Percocet and it could have a benign effect on me. It could have a discomforting effect on me. Or it could have that kind of explosive effect that it has on some people. And you can easily become addicted. So I think that you have to be, you have to accept responsibility. And you have to be an educated consumer. And when you go to the doctor and he prescribes one of these opiates, or he wants to prescribe, or she wants to prescribe one of these opiates, you have to take a step back and you have to say to yourself, or say to him, should I really have that? Is there something else you can give me? Can I take Tylenol? Can I bear with some pain? I mean, this fiction that we should be painless is exactly that. It's a fiction. Sometimes it's better to put up with a little pain and not to tempt the devil, so to speak.
Thank you. Next question is from Mark. What keeps you continuing through your sobriety?
What keeps me going with my sobriety? You know, I never want to go back to the life I was living. You know, I experienced so much pain. With the stuff I put my family through, like, that's one of the biggest things, that while you're in addiction, you don't care what you're doing to your family and the people that love you. And, you know, like, my dad is here today, and, you know, 4 years ago, I can't say that he would be here for me for something that I was going through like this, you know, or that he would be proud of me sitting up here, because it was fictional. It wasn't something that I could see or that anybody would see. And, you know, number one is, you know, my son. You know, it may not have changed my life the day that I held him, but, you know, he changes my life every single day. You know, I'm all he's got, and, you know, that's the same driving force while you were here, you know. And I continue to go to 12-step meetings, and I'm involved in that program, and I remind myself every single day of who I really am, you know, because the second I forget, that's a day that's won by my disease, and that's how I stay sober. So.
Thank you. Next question for the prosecutor again. What is being done by the law enforcement to catch drug dealers locally and on the dark web?
Well, we have a cyber crimes unit, which is doing our investigations on the dark web. However, most of that is being done on the federal level, quite frankly. We in Bergen County are trying to concentrate on drug dealers instead of drug users. We look at drug users as victims who really need education and need rehabilitation. We have a very active narcotics interdiction unit, which is in our narcotics task force, which patrols the streets and interdicts those who are carrying drugs. Just, I think, 2 weeks ago, they made an arrest where they discovered 5 keys of fentanyl, enough to kill several million people. So we're pretty active in that area.
Thank you very much. And the last is a wrap-up, going back to you, Ms. Prosecutor. A couple questions here. Are there any long-term recovery programs in New Jersey? Where do the funds come from if there are long-term programs? And will insurance cover any of these programs?
Yeah, we were talking about that. I was talking with someone when I got here this afternoon. There are some good recovery programs, but there are some rip-offs out there. And I want you to be very careful, because what happens is, and I'll direct this to you parents, you find out your child is addicted somehow, whether there's an overdose or there's an arrest, and you're in a state of panic, and you're thrashing around, and you're looking for help. And there are many rehabs out there that are willing to take your money and to pull you in. And some of them are very expensive. And they all look good on paper. They will all tell you they're the best. They will all tell you they have a psychiatrist on staff that is going to address your kids' psychiatric issues. Most of the time, it's not true. They may have a part-time psychiatrist that comes in and will talk to 100 people a day, 1 day a week. That's not psychiatric treatment. So be very careful with that. I agree with Gail. The most effective program is one that will keep your kid away from the drug for a year or more. Now, that's not always possible because these drug programs can cost you $10,000 or $12,000 a month. And where's the money going to come from? And I've seen some parents go through their life savings trying to save their kids. Insurance companies will generally only pay for about 30 days if you're an active addict. And 30 days is not enough. And after 30 days, they will sometimes pay for outpatients. So there are public rehabs that will take you. Beds are limited. And part of addiction, you should understand, part of the disease of addiction is relapse. So you can have a person that will cycle through rehabs 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and until they finally hit bottom or get the message and decide to get well. The best program is the program that the person wants to work.
Thank you very much. Thank you all to our panel members.
So we're just going to close up right now, and I just wanted to thank whoever actually asked the long-term treatment question, because one of the things we know about opiate addiction is that 30 days doesn't do anything to heal the brain for opiate addiction. It requires a year and a half, and even then, yes, relapse is absolutely something that happens for many of them. I will say that many of our resources outside are the first stop that you would come into contact with if there was an addiction issue, and they are all connected with many long-term programs. There are a few really good ones right here in Bergen County. Newbridge Services has Spring House for Women on campus, which has a high success rate for long-term recovery for women. There's a halfway house called the Ladder Project that is pretty local in Eva's Village that do great work with opiate addiction that are right here in Passaic County, actually. And a few in Rockland County that are doing some great work with men for opiate addiction as well. We really want to thank you all for coming today. Ms. Roberts and I did screen all the questions because some of them were so multi-layered that they're going to require more than a short panel answer. So what we are going to do is put our heads together, send some of the questions out to our panelists, ask them to bring them back to us, and then we will put them up on the Q&A for the Ramsey Junior Women. So if you haven't given us your email yet, please do, because we'd like you to get that information that you asked. And you guys asked some wonderful questions. Thank you again all for your time, attention, and patience. We love having you here. If you could just stand and give a round of applause to these guys. It's hard work to get up here and talk.